Well, this one should be interesting. I just got done seeing for the first time what is probably my favorite horror movie of 2019. Movie would probably still go to Joker, but horror film 2019, it's got to go to this. I thought it was going to be Doctor Sleep, but this is an excellently made film. And of course, I was going to do backstory, but whatever. Of course, I'm talking about The Lighthouse, the sophomore effort by Robert Eggers, who also directed The Witch, which is a movie I also loved, thought it was fantastic across the board, as I do this one. Now, a little bit of backstory is I first heard about this movie obviously sometime last year, but Robert Pattinson had just been announced as the new Batman. Now, when I first heard that, I still had Twilight on the brain. I was like, fuck that, it's gonna be terrible. I don't want him being Batman. We don't need a bunch of teeny boppers going to see Batman because of Robert Pattinson. But then I started looking at his career, and I know he's not super proud of Twilight. He's been doing everything he can to get away from it, which I respect. And when it came to doing this, he was looking for the most extreme character possible. And Robert Eggers wanted him anyway. So he got the role in this. So then once I set all my Twilight negativity aside, it was like, I want to see what this guy can do. I want to see what he brings to Batman. Open mind, 100%. Then I found out about this. So I heard about The Lighthouse after I relented and accepted Robert Pattinson as an actor. There's one other film I wanted to see. I think it's called Good Time, but I could be wrong. This was getting a ton of great reviews. I mean, it's at a 92 on Rotten Tomatoes right now, but this movie has just been praised and praised and praised. I could not wait to see it. Also, it took me, whenever my review for The Witch was, that was the first time I saw it, because I didn't look into The Witch much. I thought it was just going to be another shitty paranormal, like The Nun. I thought it was going to be like The Nun or like another Conjuring spinoff. But I saw The Witch, and I loved everything about that movie. Absolutely everything. And then when I found out that Robert Eggers was doing this, that was, and what kind of movie it was, like essentially two guys looking after a lighthouse, they go crazy. That's the absolute basic way to put this film. I like Willem Dafoe. I've been looking to see more of Robert Pattinson in roles like this. Really looking forward to it because of Robert Eggers directing it. It was also written by Eggers and his brother Max. And yeah, I was totally stoked about this. Finally got it. Finally watched it just now. 4 minutes in, just get to it. I loved this movie. I did. This is not a good movie to review after one viewing because it is a mindfuck. It really is. I mean, yeah, basically you do have Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe. At one point, they both go by the same name. When you find out who he really is, they both go by the name Tom. So I'm just going to say Pattinson and Dafoe. But they're these two guys. Dafoe is like the older, seasoned kind of sea guy, sea captain. He even does the whole like army matey, or I should have said laddie, army laddie. He does that and it's not cringy. I actually buy it when he does that accent. Pattinson is kind of in and out of accents, but I don't fault him for that. They're supposed to be staying at this lighthouse in this isolated island off the coast of New England, which Robert Eggers is from New England. He's a fellow New Englander like myself. I live in Maine, so I definitely know about lighthouses. They're supposed to be there for 4 weeks, and Pattinson is kind of the grunt. He's the guy that has to do all the hard work. You know, bringing kerosene to the top of the lighthouse for fuel, getting things for, doing all the repairs, emptying chamber pots, going back and forth with wheelbarrows. And Dafoe, like, he keeps, like, his log, like, his journal, and, he's kind of the boss. If it sounds like I don't know what I'm talking about, it's because I literally just got done watching it, and this movie is pretty deep. I guess you could say this movie's been called pretentious, and I get that. I get why people would say that. There seems to be some sort of movement in horror the last 5 years or so, which years ago, artistic horror movies was like Martyrs, Human Centipede, Serbian Film, those fucked up films. That's considered artsy horror. But now, artsy horror or pretentious horror like this, The Witch, Midsummer, and the one Jennifer Lawrence did, Mother, by Darren Aronofsky. I haven't seen those two, but, this whole pretentious horror movement, I do get that. I get how this comes off as pretentious. I don't fault it for it. But I think it's a great movie. It was shot in a 1:19:1 ratio, aspect ratio, because that's, like, I guess the earliest kind of ratio used for film. Shot in black and white. I love black and white. I know a lot of people that don't. I think that's sad. Because Eggers wanted it to feel like something from 1890, which is when this takes place. And just as the film goes on, Pattinson experiences these dreams, hallucinations. Are they real? Are they not? Like, he sees, even within the first 10 minutes, he sees, like, huge, like, logs of wood sort of floating around, and then a beautiful mermaid. Which, when he first gets there, he finds a scrimshaw whittled down to a nude mermaid. Which, yes, he does masturbate to. There's a couple of masturbation scenes. Which, some people can call it gratuitous. But if you really think about it, just being isolated in a remote area, I mean, I guess it brings some realism to it. Don't really know what I'm talking about right now. But basically, Dafoe, when he works, he always goes up to the lantern house of the lighthouse. And it's locked. He doesn't let Pattinson in. For the first third, the first act of the movie, there's very little dialogue. You get very long periods with no dialogue, which is ballsy. Because nowadays, there's what's called short attention span theater, which means you have to have constant dialogue, constant acting all the time to keep the audience's attention. But at one point, he needs to go into like this shed, and there's a one-eyed seagull in the way, and he has to swat at it. And during dinner, Dafoe tells him, it's bad luck to kill a seabird, which Pattinson sort of says, tall tales, and he actually slaps him. He's very superstitious, which, people who work at sea are very superstitious. And it gets, at one point, he kills the seagull in a pretty realistic looking way. I like the way they did that. It's brutal, but... And from then on, everything goes to hell. This is still a very new movie, so I'm going to say spoilers right here. I know I sound like shit. I left work early today because I don't feel well and I'm stuffy. I'm going to say spoilers because it's still very new and I don't want to ruin this for anybody. This is a movie that I highly, highly recommend. I find it crazy the only Oscar nomination it got was the cinematography, which is gorgeous. This is one of those movies that comes along every so often where you can literally frame every shot. Every shot looks beautiful. I haven't seen a movie like this since There Will Be Blood, which isn't a horror movie, but There Will Be Blood has been my favorite film of the 2000s across the board. This is up there with it. In fact, I was even thinking about this, and then I read it, but someone in some review likened or compared Pattinson's performance to Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood, which is as good a compliment as you could ever get or give. So spoilers right here. Go see The Lighthouse. Don't download it. Go buy the fucking thing because it's worth it. So right here, spoilers. After he kills the seagull, we see there's just this storm that does not let up. And, at the beginning of the film, Pattinson doesn't really drink. Then it gets to a point where that's all they're doing. They're just getting drunk. To the point where they even run out of alcohol. So they just start mixing either... turpentine or kerosene and honey, and they start drinking that shit. Because after he kills the seagull, it's the storm that won't let up. They're low on rations. When they go and check, like the ration hole, I guess it is, it's all just booze. And so, they just keep getting drunk. Pattinson admits that there was some sort of accident when he worked at a timber yard in Canada, that he failed to prevent, and someone died, and he assumed their identity. So the name Ephraim Winslow is not his real name. It's Thomas Howard. He's Thomas Wake. And it just gets to the point where you don't really know which one is crazy. Both of which are kind of unreliable narrators. And it's a big question. Is all this really happening? Is it all in someone's head? Which, by the end of the film, there's a lot of endings explained videos about this. I'm not going to be able to do it justice. But, he sees visions of, like, him as a sea monster, and because he wants to leave, he wrecks the lifeboat with an axe, chases him back inside, and he's able to talk him into, like, you chased me with an axe. You wrecked my lifeboat. Like, he's trying to twist the insanity around. Pattinson finds his log, which says, there's assault, drunk on the job, poor work, which we've seen he's busted his ass the whole movie, but his log says otherwise, that he recommends severance without pay. And he just continues to berate him, and he finally, as he's beating him, he sees the mermaid, he sees him as like a Neptune kind of sea monster, and he beats him, and then this part kind of confused me, but he tells him to bark, and he ties a rope around his neck, and he walks on all fours, and he leads him outside to the ration hole to bury him. But then after he buries him, he comes back. There's a scuffle, and he kills Dafoe with an axe. He gets up, and he takes his lantern house keys, and he gets all the way up there, and he opens it. He reaches his arm in, and he like screams in ecstasy, slips, breaks his leg, and then we see the final shot. There's no lighthouse. He's on all these rocks, naked, eye missing. We don't see much, but I guess he's open and the seagulls are pecking at his innards while he's still alive. And that's how it ends. I guess it's the Greek mythology of Proteus and Prometheus. Prometheus stole fire from the gods, and he was punished by laying on this rock, and every day an eagle would come and pick at his innards. So like the lighthouse can be the fire that he stole from Willem Dafoe because he killed him and took his keys. Other people have said, you know, maybe he crashed there, and as we see him at the end, that's how he is, and the whole movie's been like, I guess the most common theory is that the lighthouse is purgatory. And then what you do with that after, I guess, is your own thing. I don't know if there's a definite answer, but a lot of people seem to go with the Proteus-Prometheus story. There's even a part where Willem Dafoe is talking about how, you know, this could all be in your imagination. I'm not real. This lighthouse isn't real. This is all just in your head right now. And you could just be some lunatic babbling in a room somewhere. I know it sounds like I rushed through this review, but this is not a movie I should have reviewed after only one sitting. But no matter how confusing the ending, and I'm sorry if I didn't go too in depth with it, that's just my understanding of it. And because also, like, while he's beating Dafoe, one of the visions he sees, other than the mermaid and, like, the sea monster, is the guy that died in that accident, whose identity he stole. I mean, it makes sense. He died somehow. He ended up on those rocks somehow, I guess naked. He stole the fire. And, like, Dafoe is also, like, the keeper of heaven. That's why he's judging him the whole time. Judging him on his work. But either way, I thought this movie was awesome. And I wish I said this before, spoilers, but I've heard several people make comparisons to The Shining, which, one, I agree with, you know, in this one location, going crazy. And The Shining is my #1 favorite movie ever, so I agree with that, and I say that's a hell of a compliment. There's also a bit of Eraserhead, not just because it's black and white, but like the hallucinations. Not as heavy as Eraserhead, but... And just with all the greatness and talent that Robert Eggers has. Like, if you loved The Witch, you will enjoy this. We need more movies like this. Like, I've seen some reviews where people... I'm not going to say who they are, but the title is The Lighthouse Review, This Movie is Garbage. I'm not going to call them out, but they didn't like this movie because they thought there was no plot, there was a lack of jump scares. It's not that kind of horror movie. I applaud that there's no cheesy-ass, cheap fucking jump scares at all through this movie. Also, the score. The score isn't really music. It's sort of like a Chainsaw Massacre kind of score, where it's just like ominous sounds and sound effects. Like, there's just a lot of like saxophone, like, and just eerie, ominous tones that really helps set the mood. And plot, I mean, that is the plot. Two guys in a lighthouse. I guess going crazy. Is it real? Is it not? And then you make it up at the end. But, and I don't mean to put down other people's opinion, but, and also, I've heard people make fun of, like, the scenes where Willem Dafoe is farting or Robert Pattinson jerking off. It wasn't as abundant as I thought it was going to be. Like, I was expecting, like, a Blazing Saddles kind of fart scene. Not really. And the masturbation scenes, it felt like there was a purpose behind it. It didn't feel gratuitous. And I thought Robert Pattinson was phenomenal. This movie alone made me a fan of Robert Pattinson. I think I applaud him for trying to get away from Twilight. And that he's willing to put himself out there to do whatever. I really do. And this movie did it. And of course, Willem Dafoe is great as always. But everything about this movie, the simplicity of the plot, to an extent. It does get crazy and deep and layered. Almost ambiguous. But I loved the location. Loved the cinematography. Loved, the black and white, the 1:19:1 aspect ratio. Loved the simplistic, ominous score. Loved the performance of the two leads. Especially Pattinson. I was blown away by Pattinson. And for a sophomore effort, and I only mean sophomore as in not like second rate, but like second attempt, Robert Eggers, I think, will go on to be one of the great horror directors, because I thought The Witch was phenomenal, and I liked this even more. I guess his next film is called The Northman. Don't know anything beyond that. I will definitely be seeing that when it comes out. But even with its pretentiousness, I still thought this was a great, like, I would even say masterpiece. Everything about this movie worked and excelled for me. It exceeded all expectations. I thought this movie was phenomenal. Favorite horror movie, 2019. And I still think Joker is my favorite of last year. But this is the best horror movie, even above Dr. Sleep. Beyond that, I don't really know what else I could say. But The Lighthouse, fucking phenomenal. I loved it. We need more horror movies like that. One that's willing to take the risks. Long periods of silence, no dialogue. Not afraid. It doesn't spoon feed you the plot. And I thought it looked great. But almost at 25 minutes, but that is my review for The Lighthouse. If you haven't seen it and you're still watching, go see it. I thought this was an excellent movie. But thank you for watching.